The subtitle, thank you, Vicki, for remembering to do that. Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. The session today is called Supporting Language Learners and Their Families. And the subtitle below that is just in reference to how many different labels there are for the work that we are doing in the education field of trying to support language learners and their families. I'm Bev Schumacher. I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And helping out is Vicki Robinson. She is with Lone Star. And Vicki is assuming leadership on a company called Learning Props, which I started 30-some years ago. And so we are working together in support of each other, trying to advance learning opportunities and especially family engagement. So students in schools need your language support. And that's what the whole emphasis of the session that we're sharing today is, how do we give that support to them and their families? I'm going to use a lot of references that are early learning because that has been the field I have been deeply immersed in, but understand that this is applicable to any grade level where we are working with language learning. And you are going to see on the slides that I share in red references to where I have found information. And I am not an expert in this field, but I am experienced in this field. So I share with you wholeheartedly my passion for not only working with families, but also supporting them in whatever language they may be speaking. So what we need to understand is that most preschool teachers now or in the near future will have at least a student that is a dual language learner. 20% of the early childhood workforce is bilingual. So there's a large gap in those numbers. So we need to train English speaking teachers as well to work with bilinguals. So it's a fact to know that every classroom needs to consider students and their families' language, their culture, and also identity needs. So emphasize that we need to meet families where they are at. In terms of my journey and how I've gotten to what I'm doing today, I was a classroom teacher. I had some experience working in a public library. I became an instructor of parent-family activity classes, moved into a position for parent involvement coordinator. I had the opportunity to write a book called The Menu for Building Family Partnerships for the Southern Early Childhood Association, and have since revised and expanded that publication. And along the way, I also became the maker of educational materials. So let me talk about the pictures that are on this slide. The first picture in the upper left is a picture of a plastic bag with a book and an activity. What we saw working with our families is they were not doing the literacy enrichment that we needed our children to have for vocabulary growth. And so we started sending home a book and a bag and quickly realized we needed to make them also applicable to hands-on learners. So we started to put activities together to send home. My durability of file folders in the hands of families was not very long lasting. And so we were continually remaking and recreating all of those materials. Ended up working with a silkscreener in our community. So the next slide you see, and what you see here, is actually a little tote bag that has a zipper on the side. And when this zipper is opened, the inside is a game that supports the concept, just like my file folders, but it allowed me a sustainable resource that I could be sharing to families. Always paired everything we sent home to families with a literacy component. Didn't take long for people to say, hey, those are lovely, Bev, but we need bilingual ones. And so the next picture there shows what happened. We took the very same activity that we had done in the English, and we made it bilingual. So we have both the Spanish on one side, the English on the other, and the inside is the two languages merged together. Continue my sharing my resources to people. People said, but Bev, we need Chinese, we need Arabic. And therefore you see the colorful books on the bottom of the right hand of the bottom row. Those are resources that emerged because we needed resources for families to have language in their primary language at home, as well as English learning. And the very last slide is a new chapter. Working with Vicki, we are creating additional resources so that we can have a continuum of products that families can be shared the materials to work with their children at home that begin with the beginning of the year all the way through the end of the year for both 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. So that I'll share more about that at the very end. So I'm asking you to read what I have on the screen. What does this say? And what languages are those? Go ahead, let you brainstorm for a minute, see how many you can figure out. If you found out that it said, thank you for joining us today, you were right on target. You read that language very, very well. In case you're not familiar what those languages are, the top row is Arabic. The next one is Hmong, followed by Chinese, Spanish, and German. How did that make you feel reading those? What if you were to take 2 minutes and you would play something in another language on YouTube, on movie, and a cartoon, a speech, something for your staff to be able to watch for a period of 2 minutes? How would that experience make them feel? Go ahead and enter into the chat how you think that would make you feel. So think of a one-word phrase of what your feeling would be if you could not read the signage, if you could not understand what you were visualizing on a screen. While you're doing that, I'm just going to review for those of you who came just a few minutes late. If you missed our very opening slide, please enter into the chat your name, your position, program you're with, community you are coming from, and your best family engagement approach resource that could help some of the others that are on our conversation today. My assignment for you is that during the session, you will take 3 ideas away. This could be a fact you want to share to somebody else. It can be a thought that you have for how you can reach out to children and families. It could be some kind of a strategy or technique that you could take back. Also shared with you, and Vicki can help get these if you did not receive them. I put together 2 pages of a handout for you. Those will have some of the slides that we are sharing today. If at the end of the session you would like more information than that, let Vicki or I know, and we will certainly follow through and get you that information. So your assignment, 3 ideas in the next hour. So Vicki, what kind of comments did you get? Did you get some statements of how people said they felt? And I flashed my slide up too quick there. So
that's okay. Confused and uncomfortable were 2 of them. Ambiguous, frustrated, uncomfortable. Let's see. Not very interested because I would be confused.
Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes we need to be humbled to really put ourselves in someone else's position and say, where are they coming from? And then how can I help and support them? English learners are the fastest growing student population in the United States. 4 out of 5 who are entering U.S. schools are Spanish speakers. So we have a heavy emphasis in our country of needing Spanish speaking. That doesn't mean we don't work with the others as well. But teachers need resources and training to turn their classroom into environments where students can be learning and thrive. Parents need information and channels to connect to their children's schooling and become partners with teachers in supporting the language and literacy and cognitive development needed for school success. This is not an issue that is only for Texas or only for Alabama or for Washington State. This is across the United States. And again, I have references shared so that if you want further information and know where these statistics came from, that you have an opportunity to go back and to find some of those things that I'm sharing today. I tried to use a variety of resources that were reliable to give you an idea of where we're at and where we need to go. So here's some language facts. So just bear with me throwing a bunch of numbers out. But the percentage of English language learners in schools, we were at 10.3% in 2020, and that was up from 9.2. So note that it's an issue that's on the rise. This is not something that is new. This is an ongoing kind of thing that we can only anticipate will continue to rise to higher levels. Dual language learners are young children, generally 0 to 5. who are learning 2 or more languages. This term is used to emphasize the fact that children of this age are developing in their primary language while also are learning the second language. There are more than 3,600 dual language learning programs in the United States. In 44 states across the United States, a majority of those are located. So not every state is recording those. And that could be how the data is also reported by school districts. Multilingual learners is one of the newer umbrella terms. So you may hear that flashed out a little bit more often. Most often spoken in the United States, the languages that are going to be most common is English, 78.1%, Spanish, 13.5%, Asian and Pacific Island, 3.6%, and other Indo-European, 3.7%. So just understand the scope and the depth of what we're dealing with here. Language trends to be aware of. In 2019, about 22.6% of school children did not speak any English at home in the United States. Over the last 20 years, the number of Spanish speakers has grown by 60% in the United States. Across the top is the slogan, School plus Home equals Learning. If you've heard any of my other webinars, and by the way, we have a list of webinars that Vicki can provide to you that we have done over the last couple years, that if any of these would be helpful to you in the training that you do or the learning that you do, we welcome you to download any of those. They are all free, but I use the phrase very often, school plus home equals learning. We do everything we can during the school day, but we also need what we can have happen at home happen so that the ultimate learning is possible. So home plus school equals learning. Short formula, it's on your handout. But that's just a quick reminder that this is a partnership we need to establish. Family engagement means that the responsibility to be involved must be shared with the school actively reaching out to jointly support children's learning and development in ways that are effective and comfortable for families. Schools need to engage in intentional efforts to work with families. And this comes from Karen Mapp and Ann Henderson, 2 very, very notable people in this early learning field. So reflection questions. I'm going to ask you to think about this one. I want you to share in the chat your idea, but what if you were to make a call to a family and leave a message for that family and they didn't call you back? Why might that have happened? So Vicki's going to summarize those and share those back with you, but reflect on it. You make a call to a family, you've left them a message, but they didn't call you back. Why might that be? So embracing parents as partners. Vicki, I'm going to stop sharing here and see if I can get rid of all of this stuff that's coming at the top of my screen. I'm having a difficult time seeing here. I'm going to see. Nope, it's not going to go away. Okay, you guys just have to bear with me. I'm trying to read underneath some other information that's on my screen here. So we need to embrace parents, and we need to embrace them in a way that they can be a positive influence on their child's learning. We know a great deal about family engagement. It is not a new topic by any means in what we are doing in the learning field, but yet we need to make sure that it is an ongoing effort to reach out to engage those families. Making it happen, it takes continual attention, effort, and dedication. In other words, it needs to be very intentional and very purposeful. We have people joining us today from being classroom teachers to being administrators to being resources to educators. So understand that this is not something that any one group needs to do, but it's a joint effort of all of us working together. When we talk about engagement, there are some challenges to them. And one of the engagement challenges is, how do we measure it? How do we know if we're doing engagement well, if we're reaching our goal, or or what the potential the family has to offer their child's learning. So we need to think about what kind of a scale could we use. If I were interested in losing weight, I would get myself a scale and I would be able to tell you within a pound or two how much I weighed in the last time that I had weighed myself. Or if I had an issue with finances, I would be very cautious to know what the balance is in my checkbook. So what are the levels that you have in terms of how you measure whether families are there and with you? So you might, for example, count the number of participants that come to a program, but you have to keep those records ongoing. So the next time you have an event, you know whether you're getting people or new people or not, whether it's a repeat of the old people that had come the last time, whether it's a new audience that you've not yet reached, has to be reached out to. It might be how much time are families spending on the activities that you ask them to do with their children. It could be the number of books read. It could be feedback from the youth that they give you input. I was overjoyed one time when I did a survey of families and I found out that I had a lot of dads who were helping and were engaged with learning at home. They had dads in homes where I had no record that there was a father support. So it became a new person we could then reach out to and expand. One of the things I've done in creating the resources that I've created over time is an area called Learning Progress. And we're constantly saying to families, what skill has your child mastered? What needs practice yet? So you will see that on every one of the resources that we have, there is always a little section that says, how are they doing and what have they learned? What needs to be practiced? So think about those questions that you can pose to families to do surveys with. In our current work that we're doing with doing translations, we have boiled it down to a process that we're doing. We are using Google Translates and it does a fairly decent job of it. But then we also have two different educators who are English as a second language teachers who have been going back and reading it again. Because sometimes there are just things that might translate, but that doesn't mean that it is a correct translation. So for example, we have two books that have reference to emotions, the That's Me book and the Healthy Me book. And one of the words that was being translated was mad. So if you look at the little girl with the mad face right there, you could say, yeah, that's a mad face. But when we put it into the translation with Google, it came back as crazy. That's not one we wanted to use. We wanted to more or less express the feeling of the sadness. Another example of it is we have the word excited. So you can see the little girl that's excited there. But unfortunately, it had translated it in a way that had a sexual implication to it, not the emotion we really wanted to translate. So you have to be very careful. I worked with someone one time by the name of Fuller. And when the newsletter was translated, it came back that my staff member was full of something else that was in the sentence. So you have to be very cautious about translations. If you can't read it, make sure somebody else does do the translations for you. So parents or partners, what's the difference? I'm going to ask you to use the letters in the word parents to spell the word partners. So you have to rearrange them. Do you see the rearrangement at the bottom? I'm okay until I get to one more letter R. I'm short the letter R to be able to spell the word partners. The difference between parents and partners is you are the difference. So you can take that letter R and replace it with the word A-R-E, but you are the difference. So the question is how are you building relationships that are partnerships? How are you reaching out to these families whose culture, whose experiences, whose language may be different than what yours is? But remember, we have to have what we can do at school plus what happens at home to impact the amount of learning that that youngster benefits from. It has to be intentional and with purpose. Intentional and purposeful. Have you ever felt uncomfortable when you were working with families? You go knock on the door and how do you feel? Have you ever felt uncomfortable? And if you have, I say good, because so do families. They don't know why you're knocking on the door. They don't know why you were calling them on the phone. They know you called on the phone, but they don't know what they need to do. So they feel uncomfortable until you have built a relationship with them. So parent or partner, what's the difference? You are that difference. So supporting relationships, where do you begin? Well, first, be the leader. It's your role to invite them. Whenever you have an opportunity, frame the focus of your conversation around their child. The child is your link to the parents. Every parent wants their child to do well, to be successful, to be happy and well-adjusted. So use that as the link. Share pictures of the children in your program. Show the family specific things that their youngster has been doing so they understand what is happening and what is going on. And by all means, smile. If you smile at the family, you start building this relationship, this connection with them. I had an awesome school receptionist. And every time before she'd pick up the phone, when the phone was ringing at her desk, no matter how frazzled it was in the office, she'd take a breath and she'd smile. And then she began the phone conversation. And it made all the difference in the world, she said. Respect the child's home language while helping the child learn English. Provide materials that reflect the child's culture and or are written in the child's home language. So even if you're not teaching a second language in a classroom, if your main primary language is still English in the classroom, but you have a student who is a dual speaker, then make sure that we try to put materials in the classroom that will help reflect that. So you have books, puzzles, posters, games, dramatic play props, music in the classroom, to children see themselves as an important member of their community. We're going to talk a little bit more about Learning Heroes in a few minutes, but a wonderful resource with lots of information that is not related to an educational organization that's very across the road in terms of what they're trying to do, but they're trying to represent the parent side as well as the education side. So what do families need? My definition is they need three things. They need knowledge, they need skills, and they need resources. So for example, what you're seeing on the screen in the upper right is a game that we put together called On Our Way to Preschool. It's intended to be shared with children before they come to school for the first time as a 4-year-old. So what we put together was getting information to that family so they would understand. There's a section in the bright colored bands that you see on that document in the upper right-hand corner. They talk about behavior, they talk about self-help skills, they talk about getting along with others. Sometimes parents don't understand what is happening in the classroom and what information they need. So present that information to them in their first language. Will you have families who are not readers in their language? Yes. And those are things you're going to have to learn and find ways to work around. What kind of skills do they need? Many of our preschoolers came to school with a fist to try to hold a pencil or a crayon with, rather than using the proper hold of their fingers with the tool in their hand. So we tried to explain to them what that looked like. And the other resource that they have is a fun kind of game, helping them talk about words, helping them build some vocabulary and language skills so that they are learning those skills and parents have a grasp of the kind of information you are expecting preschoolers to have experience with. So reflection question time. Vicki, why, if I made a phone call to a family, why would they not call me back?
All right, well, we have several interesting ones here. They could be overwhelmed, busy.
Okay.
They ran out of minutes on their phone. Somebody might be sick. They didn't understand the message. The communication or details of the message was confusing to them. Let's see, wrong number. You may have had a wrong number in your file for them. Did we leave it in their language or did they understand? Maybe they just didn't check the message, or the student who checked the message deleted the evidence. They were afraid.
Did anyone say they didn't care?
Not one person said they didn't care.
That's the answer that I want to make sure that you realize they do care. They care very, very deeply about them, but you came up with lots of very good reasons. Sometimes we assume that a way of communication that's comfortable to us is comfortable to them. That's not always the case. So we need to find out, how is the best way to reach out? We're very close to an Amazon fulfillment center, like I guess part of the much of the world is today. But as families went there and started working, they could not have their phones with them at work. And there's many employers may have rules like that. So if the family needed to be reached during the day and the teacher was trying to leave a message, surprise, they weren't getting those messages. So there's many complicated reasons why messages don't get through to our families. The next slide about figuring out how best to facilitate parental involvement in education when English is not a parent's first choice. First of all, respect the cultures of the students and their families. For many cultures, an educator's degree earns them a level of respect with that family, and they will very often comply with what is asked of them because of that respect. An educator imposing their views, however, on whether English should be spoken at home or not, or if that should be the only language spoken in the schools, can cross a line. So don't make decisions that impact their children. Partner with the parent and work together to determine the best plan of action. Make sure that the student is successful in school. Small doses of success can really, really bolster a student's learning. And this, again, I share the reference there in case you wish to go deeper into that information. This is tips for communicating with English-speaking patients. And I underlined the word patients there so that you realize the medical field began doing translations of every single document that was in their collection, so that when they shared information with parents, that they were able to share it in every language. So they were much further ahead than we were in the education field of making sure that they had translations available in all of the important paperwork, registration forms, etc. So the things that they suggested were: keep sentences short and simple, maintain appropriate eye contact, speak slowly, don't use slang, be mindful of your body language, be culturally competent, engage with the interpreter, look at the family, not the interpreter. Oh, I said that wrong. Okay. This one, that's exactly the way I copied it from that resource. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not what I meant to say. I would definitely say, look at the family, not the interpreter. Be patient and repeat what you said if there is some kind of a misunderstanding. Some other things that I found going through lots of things in the education area is to just listen. There's a phrase that says we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we're much wider when we use them in that proportion. Use technology. Do a short video of the child in the classroom so you can show the parent. Show them whatever you can rather than tell. So use visuals of all sorts. Color code information that you're sending home so that things that are assignments might go home in one particular color and that newsletters go home in another color. We always used purple paper to send information home so that when they came home and it was purple, they knew that it was information from our program to be looked at. Be respectful, considerate, and positive when you're working with the families. Are there any language translation tools, Vicki, that are people recommended to each other? Are you unmuted? Thanks.
Once I did unmute myself finally. I'm looking back at notes. I do not have anything in my notes. I'm just rolling back here to look again.
Okay, I'm going to make you all feel guilty then. If there is some translation tool that is being used that's being helpful, Please share that. I had an encounter the
Please
other
do.
night. We do some volunteering work at a theater here in town. And we had somebody doing cleaning up between shows, and there was a spill that needed to be cleaned up. So I went to address the gentleman who was doing the cleaning, and he right away motioned, no English, no English. So he got his phone out and he held his phone out, and I said, I need your help. I need you to clean up a spill. And I told him where it was, and he goes, and then he reads his little note, and then he motions to me again that he would wanted me to wait, and we went back to where the attention was needed. It was as slick as could be, but he was using what he knew with reading his language on his screen, and I was just speaking into it, and we had a wonderful time. Unfortunately, he didn't understand my question to say, what program is that? That didn't get it. So it was maybe something he was provided by the theater as well. Focus on conversation turns with children. This is information that's been done with a group with it's called Lena. There's been TV specials, etc. But if you doubt what children have the capability of doing and building language skills, make sure that you're getting a lot of those exchanges between parents. Every time it's served to the child, they respond back. It's served back to the child, they respond back. We are building the brain's capacity for language, and that's an important thing for us to be doing with all children. Build a language foundation. Learning names of different types of shoes is no more complex than learning new languages. So you see a variety of different things I could put on my feet, and you see them in both languages. To a child learning a word in another language, it's no different than having one more different type of shoe style. Possible dangers of language barriers, and there are many of them, but it's real easy to have a misunderstanding if we're not communicating well with each other. It's also easy to have a conflict because they thought I was doing something and instead I thought they were doing something. It can be very frustrating. It can make them feel like they are insignificant. It's a behavior that we often do called shoulding in education. We might not intentionally mean to insult anyone, but we say, well, you should read. If I tell a parent you should read, it's implying that you're not doing your job very well, and this is what you need to do, like redirecting them. Instead, if I said, here is a book for you to read tonight, and I had their language in it, or I had someone write their language below the English content of a book, my opportunity for that family to extend learning has just increased, and our relationship has grown immensely. So when you hear the word should, stop and pause and say, how do I empower them instead of putting blame out there? As I said, I've written a book, The Menu for Building Family Partnerships. I use the analogy in the book about a menu because, like at a restaurant, we read the menu to figure out what they offer. It tells me what they're prepared to serve me. It tells me what ingredients they have on site that they are intending to make the item that I'm offering, but we have to personalize it. I'm not going to get the same choices in a Chinese restaurant as I do in a taco restaurant. There's this group that I said, I made reference to earlier called Learning Heroes, and they've done studies for a number of years. They go back several years. I heard a presentation that they did last week, and the information they continue to gather about families working with their children continues to grow. Parents don't always understand where their child is at. One of the disparities that we found is that families are not aware of where their student is at. So if you look at the chart on the bottom and you see the over time kind of results there, you see that there's a differences between, I'm sorry, my screen keeps jumping around because I'm trying to get to someplace I can't move it to. Notice the disparity. How confident are you that you have a clear understanding of how well your child is achieving academically? Look at those percentages. We're in 2021, people thought 87% of their parents were very confident that they knew where their student was at. And there was a slight variance, but not that much between Black, Hispanic, and Caucasian families. but only 69% of the parents think that their child is the level that they should be. Here's another one that shows you the percentage. Parents believe that their child is at or above grade level. But when you look at test scores, you see where they actually are at. And they are not at that high percentage. So we need to be very honest and share information that parents can help us to raise those levels and to have expectations of what the student is capable of. There's a list, and this is on your handouts. This is on the second page. There's a lot of ideas written on here. Remember, I asked at the beginning that you would get 3 ideas from our session today. These ideas that are shared on the screen right now are the things that families told the researchers that these things would be helpful for me in order to have my student improve their skills. So look at those things that are on that list, or look at your list. I will be silent for a minute so that you have a chance to do that. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go on. I'm sorry, my computer thinks it's on steroids today. It's blown everything up. I'm after looking at a little tiny picture to see what I'm actually trying to share. So forgive me for just not having this working smoothly here. I did a research project myself, and I did a pre-survey to parents before I began the research project. And I asked them, how are you involved in your child's education? And it was an open-ended question. And that open-ended question allowed them to give me their thoughts. And I had this large, meaningful list of things that families were already doing. The whole research project was called "What Practices Are Effective in Engaging Parents in Supporting Learning at Home." When we do a research project, we have to come up with a long statement always, you know. So what I also asked is, I said, how else would you like to be involved in your child's education? And over a third of those responded in that open-ended question said, any way possible, whatever the teacher recommends. And I realized that there was this gap. And the gap is that sometimes teachers have ideas of what families should be doing, but unless they communicate them, we don't have the families knowing what to do and how they can be of help. So what we did in our research project over a period of 10 weeks, we gave them 3 levels of intervention. We gave some suggestions. Other families got suggestions that had a prompt with them, or I call them props. My families began to call everything I shared with them, oh, you gave us another prop, Bev. And another level was shared resources. So for example, monkeys jumping on the bed, very common rhyme. Children love it at school, but not all cultures have that in their repertoire. So we gave them the words in their language, and we provided them with the opportunity to practice that and to do that at home with their children. At the second level, you see that on the right, and that is the same sheet, the same information, but what we've added to it is we've added some craft sticks and some cutouts so that they can make the 5 little monkeys who are jumping on the bed. And the very bottom, you'll see that there is a bag. That bag was sent home with little puppets that went on fingers, and that went home with a book that told the story in the same sheet with the information on it. So we had 3 levels of intervention. You could do that at any level, whatever concept you were teaching at school. But what we then did, we did 10 different activities each week. The next one that I'm sharing here is about opposite and directionality words. What we did was a face-to-face exchange at the level 1 of the suggestion level. And that was that the teacher suggested that they play a hide and seek game and explain why. Because those direction words are a part of our conversation, they're a part of the math curriculum. The second level took a little small item, a cutout, a rubber cutout, and a direction sheet, and they took those home in order to do. And the third level went home with a game bag and a book that companioned it. What we found out was that the suggestions were done 64% of the time. But when we gave them the extra prompt, the extra little resource to use, we went up to 73%, but up to 82% when we shared the resource. When we asked teachers how involved were families, the teachers said, well, at the suggestion level, neutral to somewhat. They didn't really rate it very highly. When we gave them the second tier, they said, oh yeah, they were somewhat very interested to do it. And when we shared the resource, they said, oh, families were very interested. So the teacher's perception was as important in the research project as was the family perception. So our total findings is that when we shared resources with families, they were more likely to do the activity, spent more time engaged in the activity. We measured minutes. They did the activities more often, and they involved more family members. So we had to collect data on those different types of measures. So a suggestions level. What I recommend is telling people to do things 3 times in 3 different ways. So if you're working on math facts, then you're going to introduce it in 3 different ways at 3 different times so that we keep encouraging and building upon it. Some simple ideas are to use a wristband to give them activity that goes home on the child's backpack through their strap or around their wrist. You're not going to try that at junior high, though, I promise. Or the sticker idea won't work at that level as well. But we would print stickers and they would be asked to do an activity with their child. So on the very bottom, that is truly a diaper there. We had infants all the way through to kindergarten readiness. And so the children that were in the nursery did have at the end of the day a sticker put on their diaper. And we had very positive feedback that families did do it. You could give a flashlight to a child. The child learning alphabet letters could write words on the ceiling in their homes. You could put something on the sidewalk and give parents chalk so that they could go home and they could write a message for their child to read or an activity for them to do in the yard. Games like bingo, calendars, those are all things that are typically done in programs. Just think of how we can do that and make sure that we can do that in multi-languages. Or you see in the lower right, that's what I call an egg speller. That was a way to help spell names. So if you have a long name like Schumacher, you need 2 egg cartons to pull that one off. But otherwise, if they have 6 letters in their first and last name, they can practice a name. They could practice spelling words doing that. The upper right corner is a little boy playing on the floor. He had done an activity with his home visitor. They were talking about clothing words and had used the dress-up game to do that. And when she left, the mother shared this picture. He had gone to his closet and he had brought out clothes and he had laid them out and he told them the names of everything that he had laid out on the floor. At the suggestion level, look at things that you can do. You can send home items in a bag, or in the upper right corner, you could send home a box mix for families to do. You can make props for being able to tell stories like the bear that you see there, a clock. You could give them a ruler so that if you're doing a measuring activity and they don't have a ruler at home, they're still empowered to do that. You could also make sure that they have their spelling list. Could we not give every child their spelling list for the next 3 weeks so that families always have those in their homes ready? Can we show families who are working on math learning as well how to use a chart to read multiplication facts? Take home resources. There's many, many resources you probably already have in your classroom that aren't being used overnight that could go home with a family that is learning a skill. But here are some of those that we are doing. In the upper right is a journal activity that we have put together. You can see a journal that's shared right below that. You can see a map, a puzzle for them to be able to do. In the middle is a game called Safe Me. It's about safety. The different colors around the outside, they either talk about a safety rule, find a safety item, or talk about something that they can practice with their family. Above that is a game called Numbers 1, 2, 3, and they're going to have both colors, and they're also going to be able to do different activities as they move across the frames. And again, on the back, you'll always find the suggestion that gives them ideas of things to do, to enrich what they're doing, to help them understand what the skill is being acquired, and to make sure that we're also asking them to observe it. So think about what you already have in your program that you could put in a bag, a Ziploc bag, a paper bag, and enable parents to build on activities that they're doing. Whenever you can, invite families to take books to go deeper. Books are going to be the best investment for families to learn. Do you see that half moon shape there on the Caps for Sale book? That was an idea shared to me at a workshop. One of the participants said, "Oh, we always put dots on." And I go, "Why do you put dots on?" I didn't get it right away. They did that to make sure that when the book was opened and returned, that they knew that that book had been used. If the book wasn't opened, then they knew they needed to have someone share it at school. Find books in the languages that your students need support in. Even if we don't have a large number of students in our classroom that need the second language, every child should realize that there are languages that are different than what they speak. And so have a variety of books. Very proudly to say Kaplan has shared our book series for at least 10, 15 years already in their catalog each year. This is another great resource that I'm going to recommend to you. Again, Mapp and Henderson went together on this. It's called Everyone Wins. Parents are eager for information to help their children. With guidance, parents of all backgrounds can support learning at home. They challenge in the book and can show research studies that emphasize that when we share those opportunities to families to be engaged, that positive outcomes do happen. So how do we equip families? That has to be your answer. I need you to look around your program and see. You'll notice on the upper center on this slide, there's something I call door hangers. I found that even on the days when families didn't meet me for a home visit, I could leave them a nice positive note. I can leave them an activity or an experience that they can do together as well. In the lower right are the solution packs that Vicki and I have been putting together. And then you see also the variety of different colors of totes there. Those are the bags that I've created over time that are on fabric that are washable and durable. I've done 4 different languages. I've also played with doing Hmong. I paid for Hmong translation 4 times before we finally felt like we could take it to be printed. And the reason for that complexity is there are certain languages that there are different variants of. You need to sometimes pick where middle ground is that will be most familiar to all of them and work with that. So when you do Spanish, the Spanish is spoken in Spain and that in Mexico are not going to be the same as what we speak here in the United States, but you just have to do the best we possibly can. And those with language ability usually do smile and say, yeah, we could have translated that one better. So the themed fabric bags is what I'm showing you here. And there's information about them, but you can create resources on your own. There'll be a slide coming up very shortly that'll show you some of the things I suggest putting in them. These are our newest resources, one called Safe Me, one called That's Me and Healthy Me. These are topics that we could have in our classrooms, but in the whole day experience, we don't have an opportunity for children to safely cross the street because we don't cross the street in our school buildings. We could talk about health all day, but when it comes to talk about brushing their teeth, those are activities that are monitored by the home. So we need to make sure that we are providing families with support that they can talk about critical topics at home and build the child's learning. We can, of course, address those topics at school, but some of the best learning is a result of what's happening in their homes. Trust families to share resources with them. Some people look at me and they say, but Bev, you know, they'll never come back. You don't know my population. And I go, yeah, I worked with a very, very high risk population, not just once, but several times. And I will say, first of all, not all families are resource rich or might have the ideas of what to do. So when I have a resource that's ready for them to use, it gives that family the power to put into action an activity that otherwise might not have been done. When resources are shared with students, their excitement and the chances of being used increase. So if I sent it home, they would have an additional amount of instructional time possible, as opposed to if I didn't share something with them. A combination of materials always addresses different learning styles. Not all children sit still to have a book read to them. That doesn't mean the vocabulary can't grow out of that book if it's still shared with them and they're moving around the room. Sharing resources already, it clearly communicates that programs want their families to support learning, that we want them to do what they can to help that student achieve. My research and experiences say that loaned resources do come back, but staff members always do play a role in maintaining them. I can tell you from one school year to another in a couple of consecutive years, how many kits we sent home, how many families responded using them, how many minutes they reported using an average amount of uses in the home. So if you're going to go out and create your own kits, please do. Know that you can by just putting things together, but we highly recommend that you always give directions to the activity you sent home, because it might not be clear to everybody who opens an activity, that there should be hints as to why you want them to play this at home. What are we working on? Are we working on alphabet awareness? Are we working on numeracy? We also want to make sure that we are giving them enrichment activities, other things that they can do, that we tell them what they have to return in the kits. And if there's some information that they need to return, how to return it, when to return it, who to return it to, etc. Always put a literacy piece in what you share to families, because it has the greatest potential for building those second language learners. So get feedback. Ask for families' insight about the students' skills and ask them questions. We had a youngster that I worked with in her home because she wouldn't talk with us at school. She wouldn't answer questions. And as we began to work at home, she slowly warmed up and she would talk at home and would answer questions, especially if her siblings were playing with us. And we were able to do assessments that we would not have ever gotten if we had not gone into the home to do that. Invite families to set learning goals. If they see that a certain color is a color that's missed on a regular basis, they're going to point that out more often. Say, hey, there's that color. What's that color? But if families know what those learning goals are, they can help be a part of the solution. Revisit the goals. If you go back for a home visit, if you have the parent come in again, say, how's that going? What have you been noticing? This is what I'm seeing. School plus home equals learning. Hopefully that was something that came to your mind as I used those words, because that was one of the slides I shared early on. As I shared, I put some of the resources that we have utilized in putting this presentation together. If you would like additional information about those resources or the full address to some of those locations, please let Vicki or I know. I'm going to ask you to look at your list. I asked you to have 3 ideas of things that you could take away from our session. And I'm going to turn this back to Vicki in a moment. I'm going to ask you if you would please enter one of those ideas that you're taking away today. And Vicki, has anybody given us some resources that they have used for translation purposes or for language instruction?
Well, we've had some interesting conversations going on in the chat.
Great, share them.
Google was one of them. We had some interesting conversations about a checklist for teachers, or parent-teacher conference checklist, examples and models. And Jason was nice enough to share a couple of different resources that he uses. So those are in the chat, and they will be shared out to everybody after the webinar as well. But yes, we have a couple of different things here, kind of rather long to explain though.
Okay. Is anybody entering in one of their 3 ideas there for you to be able to share with us as to what people can take away or what their goal might be?
Communication, learning, development, and growth must continue at home. Color coding everything is one of my takeaways. Give families 3 levels of interventions. Let's see. Yes, that's what we've got so far.
Okay. If you would please enter in your ideas of things that will nudge you. I'm going to give you a challenge, and that is to implement those ideas in the next 3 weeks. I know it is a crazy time of year where everybody is busy, but research says that if we get a new idea and we don't put it in place within 3 weeks, we're most likely to forget it. So by the time you come back in January, the idea that you wanted to take away today might not be with you. So whether that is to take your idea and stick it on your calendar, or to put it in a folder for, if you picked up a great suggestion from somebody on the chat about a resource to use for doing the parent-teacher conferences, then put that someplace that when you're beginning to think parent-teacher conferences, that you find those resources to be able to share out with your people. If anybody needs a certificate, we need to make sure that they reach you, Vicki, so that you can give them an attendance certificate.
Exactly.
Is there anything else I forgot in my frustration of having my screen go on steroids here?
I think that covers everything.
We will do another webinar sometime in January. We kind of put it on the calendar, so we will give you advance information about that. It's going to be about bookmaking. So by then, I mean to have my computer not doing this blow up thing here in front of me. We're going to try our best to have you pull out some common things like grocery bags, lunch bags, Ziploc bags, pieces of paper, and we're going to see if we can create some different book styles to make literacy a reality for some families. I'm finished, Vicki. Are you all set?
I am. I think so. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you all for
everyone.
joining us.